Today I'm going to show you how we made this recent series that we released called The Mount, and this is based on the Sermon on the Mount, so it sort of goes through this monoline type drawing throughout these various scenes to create this bumper. We're a Pixel Preacher. If you don't know who we are, we make customizable graphics and videos for churches to use and edit to match their message, so you can grab this project from our site. But I want to show you how we made it and actually how we utilized AI to help with that. So this has a lot of illustrations in it. I stink as an illustrator. I'm basically turned into a second grader when I try to draw something. So I basically told AI, hey, help me draw these scenes, and then I'll take those into Illustrator and I will trace those and create some paths and then be able to animate those. So I always get a little scared about AI. I'm sure other designers would too, but if you utilize it more as a tool, it can really help you and enhance your project and really create things that you maybe never would have come up with yourself, or give you some inspiration. So try not to be too scared of it, play around with it and have some fun with it. So what I did is I told AI to draw these monoline drawings of Jesus. And so I'm really aiming for something like this. This was one I pulled off the internet, but I just use this as inspiration. So this kind of organic, one continuously flowing line for these animations. So again, that was just from the internet. I'll move that over. And so what I did is actually used Copilot for that. So Microsoft Copilot, you can see some examples here, but basically, let me just make a new one here. So I would just tell it right now I have this one loaded in. You can actually feed it images to use as a reference. So you may say create a drawing of Jesus and it's going to give you something totally different. So try to be a little more specific with what you want. I actually can feed it that image and say I want to do something kind of like this or like this mountain drawing. And so I can say create a monoline drawing of Jesus teaching. The line is continuous, and is black and white, or black with a white background in a minimalistic vector style. Now it's not going to give me a vector file necessarily with this one, but you'll get the idea. I think it kind of understands what that might mean, or uses the internet to find out what vector is or what that may produce. So we'll let it do its thing and see what pops out. Okay, awesome. These are great. These are really good. I don't really think he needs to have a book in his hand because that kind of throws that kind of is not right. But this is a good example. So you could take this, download it. So I just downloaded like a bunch of JPEG images of things like this. So I went through and I did a bunch of, I was trying to find, Jesus, let's see, I was trying to find people talking to each other and hugging or like being friends, things like that. So it took a while to get there, but you get the idea. So I used this to create like a heart image, a bunch of other things to create the scenes that I wanted to make. So here's the images here. It's got these friends hugging, this guy walking on a path, a bunch of shots of Jesus talking, some clouds. So I took those and brought those into Illustrator. So let's open up Illustrator. So my end goal was to make paths in Illustrator so that I could take those paths into After Effects and then animate those so they kind of draw out. So we'll make a new file, 3500 by 3500 is fine. It doesn't really matter what size you make it. So I have a blank canvas here. I'm going to bring in another image. So we'll just take this image of Jesus here and I can just drag that in. This is just a JPEG, nothing fancy. And so what I want to do is get to where I can maybe scale this up. So you can do an image trace. So I have my image trace window open. You can go to Window, Image Trace. And I'm going to tell it, go and turn on the preview. So it basically creates it in real time. Toggle this advanced open. I'm going to tell it to ignore the color white. And you can play around with these paths and corners and things, but just for example's sake, we'll leave it as this. So from here, I'm going to go to Object, Expand. So I was hoping that I could do this. I can scale this up. I was hoping I could get here. Everything is vectorized and nice, good quality. The problem is it treats this as like shapes. So I cannot bring this into After Effects and have it animate automatically. If there's a way to do that, if you can tell Illustrator to create paths based on this, great. I don't know how to do that. If you do, please let me know. But my workaround was this. So this looks good. We'll just go with this for now. And I would toggle my opacity down to 50%. And I'm going to lock that layer and I would make a new layer. And then I would take my pen tool on my tablet and get my brush tool, hit B on the keyboard. And I'd actually double click on the brush icon and I'd make my fidelity pretty smooth because again, I have terrible hands for drawing, but I'll just hit OK. And so I would then just go through and trace out this image. So I would just do a really rough drawing like this, and it's going to get all squiggly because my hand's shaking. And I'm just kind of going through my drawing. The good thing with that fidelity setting is when I let go, it smooths that out. That's not perfect. It's pretty rough, but you get the idea. You could then even continue that line. So I can hit B on the keyboard. I think what you can do is maybe highlight that point, hit B on the keyboard, and it'll continue that line if your hands get tired or something like that. Okay, so basically I would do that. I would draw my entire image, and then I would end up with something like, let me open up my example. Okay, so at the end of the day, I would have this final drawing. And that's pretty rough. You could go in, you could tweak all of these points. So obviously you don't want to have him to have crab hands, so you can maybe adjust these points, bring these down a little bit, but you get the idea. So that would create this layout here. My problem that I kept running into was I would say, okay, well, I have the paths. They're not shapes. They're just straight paths. I would save this out as an Illustrator file. So I'd say File, Save As. I think I already had that. And then I would go to After Effects. Let me open up After Effects. We'll just make a new project for now, for example's sake. We'll say OK. And I'm going to bring in that Illustrator file. So my little small Jesus test is my Illustrator file. And we want to label that as a composition. Hit OK. We're going to double click on that. And now we have our image here. You can't see it. But what I want to do is I want to right click on the layer 1, go to Create, Shapes from Vector Layer, and see now it gives me the paths, but the problem is I can't animate these in one smooth line. It's going to try to like double that up. Let me change the color so you get an idea of what I mean. If I change this to white, you can see now, here's my problem. So I would go here, go down to Add, and I would say Trim Paths, and that's what I want to create the effect, but it goes wonky and it just doesn't work. So what I learned, and it took me forever to figure this out, is that you want to make sure that your paths, I'm going to highlight all of these, click and drag to highlight. You want to make sure that your paths are set to uniform and set this. You don't want this to be on a brush. Set it to basic. Okay. And that's what you want. So now save that. And we're going to go back to here, delete this. Let's just start. Let's just bring it all in. Let's start. Command I, import small Jesus test. Did I do that right? Let's just hit OK. Double click there. Now we're going to right click on our Illustrator file. Oops. I'm going to go to Create and Create Shapes from Vector. And see, now we have this single path, which is what we want. So I'm going to toggle this down. We're going to add a stroke to this. So when it's set to how we have it in After Effects, it doesn't add a stroke to it. So if I bump this up, now we have a nice stroke. And so now if I go to Add and Trim Paths, and I open this up and I move this around, you can see it's drawing this out, which is perfect. Okay, so now let's set that keyframe. So we'll do a little keyframe here. I'm just going to drag this down. My timeline is massive to like 4 seconds. We're going to set this to 0. So now over time, it just draws that out, okay? And I know I'm moving through this a little bit faster. I'm assuming you have some After Effects knowledge. So the next thing I'm gonna do is go to the stroke. I'm gonna change my caps to round and my joins to round as well. So now it's a lot smoother on these caps on the lines and the joints, or those little corners, okay? The next thing I did is I made this little smoother. So I highlighted my keyframes, right click, go to Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease. And then I go to my graph editor and I'm going to make this a whole lot smoother. So if I hit spacebar, actually so it should kind of go quickly and then it'll slow down. So quick, and then slows down. Perfect. And then the other thing I did is I added, I'm gonna use my mouse, added an offset. So that way the line is kind of snaking around as it's animating. So I'm gonna just make a little keyframe here. And we're gonna go down here. We're gonna bump this to let's call it 60 degrees. Highlight that. I hit 1 on the keyboard for my Easy Ease. I set that up manually just to make it quick. Then I'm going to go to here and we're going to adjust these lines. Now you can see it kind of, that line is snaking like a little rope moving around, which is just gives it a little bit more interest. Okay. So that, so far, that's the steps I got to here. Again, utilizing that AI, bringing this in, tracing that picture, exporting it, or just saving it as an Illustrator file, making sure you don't have this set to round, making sure it's just uniform or basic, what you want. Bring that into After Effects and then follow those steps here. Okay, cool. So now we have this animating out, which is great. The next thing I needed to do was give Jesus some sort of background. So right now, if I turn this off, you can see there's nothing behind him. So if I take that, actually his stroke is the wrong color. Let's change that. You can see I have this black line inside of my stroke there. You could easily change that by just adding a fill to this layer and making it white like that. That covers that problem. Or you could turn that off. You could go into all of these strokes here and change your color to white. Or you can search here and type in color. See, all of these are black. So you could go through and make all of these white if you wanted. But for the sake of time, we'll just turn this on. All right. So now we need a background behind them. And the reason because that is once we put all of our elements in there, like the tree and the Jesus and the people, they got to be able to cross in front of one another without seeing through each other. So the way I did that is I just made a new layer, made it a new solid, and we made this a really bright green. It doesn't really matter what color green you use, just use something bright. And then I put this below my outlines, and then I just kind of traced the shape of Jesus to have a background. So I'm gonna do that really quick. To do that, I'm gonna hit G on the keyboard for my pen tool, and I'm just gonna trace those lines. Once I get to the end, I'm just gonna go all the way across here. Doesn't really matter. Now I'm sure you can, in Illustrator, you can make a fill layer in the back and it will be faster than doing this, but this is just the way I did it. Mainly because I was trying to problem solve in After Effects as I went along. All right, so now we have this background and we have Jesus. So if I hit spacebar, it draws out like that. Okay. You can maybe even fade in that green, but we won't get to that. All right, so I'm gonna open up the actual project and show you then how I took all of those pieces and built out the scenes. All right, so we're gonna take our first scene here and I'll show you sort of how it builds out and just how we made this effect. So here's the scene here. We have our background, which is that yellow gradient. We have our drawings. So if I solo this out, you'll see our drawings here, and I'll explain that in a minute. And then we have, we'll ignore that. You don't need to worry about that. Then we have some text layers and our camera movement. That's pretty much it. But we really want to focus on our scene one color drawing. So I'm going to go into this composition. So inside of here, we have 3 compositions stacked on one another, and they're the same composition. They're just staggered a little bit in time, and then they're given some colors to create that multiple color layer drawing effect. Okay, so we're going to go down another layer to where all of this exists. And this is going to look a little more familiar. So inside of here, you can see, if I slide down on my timeline, you see our tree and our clouds, and they all look like our original Jesus character. So again, I took those images into Illustrator, traced them, brought those into After Effects, animated them, added that background so that you can create that parallax. And so inside of this scene, you're not going to have any sort of animation. I basically took all of those compositions. So again, now let's take the tree, for example. Let me just turn these all off. So we just have our tree. I double click on that. There's our tree right there. So this is a small composition, but it doesn't really matter because these are shape layers and you can scale those up as much as you want. The only thing you need to make sure of is that they are here, they're 3D, and that my green solid layer is also continuously rasterized with this little button, and they're 3D layers. So this is just like the Jesus image that we made. It's just a tree. So then I take all those, I drop them into one composition, which is here. So we have all of these various pieces. I think this one was turned off. And then I set those to 3D by clicking this little button here. Again, make sure that they are had that continuously rasterized button on. And then I move them in space. So it basically in Z space, and then I scale them up. So if I go to my different camera, you can see we have our front layers here. And again, the camera is sort of pointing this direction. So we have our front layers, then we have maybe like the tree, some hills, then the clouds in the background. So you can see there's the camera right there kind of pointing this way. But nothing's going to animate here. Again, it's just all laid out in like a really long scene that we can then shift later on. But if I go to my little camera here, this is really just for reference. I can hit C for my camera tool and I can move this around and you'll see all the little pieces that make up this scene. Okay, but whatever I do here, however I move this around, it doesn't really affect anything. Okay, so then now we'll go back a little bit. We went back to that scene one color drawings. So I took that same comp, dropped it into another composition, made sure it was all 3D because you want to honor those 3D layers throughout the entire project. So you have that continuously rasterized. That's going to keep a nice clean edge on all of your lines, and that is 3D here. So let me turn just this one on. And again, you can't really see the actual scene because we're going to do the animating later on. But again, they're all stacked in here. And on each of these compositions is I added a key light, and that was to get rid of the green. So if I go here and I turn these off, we're back to square one. So I added a key light, and that's just to key out the green. So I said, hey, take this little color picker, selected that green color, changed a few settings here, and got rid of the green. And then I said, whatever's left over, fill that with whatever color. So in this case, it's for this one, it's orange. And then in this layer, you can see it's the same setup here. Tint, fill, doesn't really matter in this scenario, but I say make everything white, make it blue. And so if I turn that one on, you'll get this blue line kind of animating on after. And it gets that effect because it's offset here in time for about a second. And then this one has the color, the purple color on there. So you can see it sort of starting there. Okay, so that creates that multiple line drawing color effect here. And so then I take this composition, drop it into another composition, which is scene one. And here is where I can animate. So as an example, I will go back and show you how that works. So I'm just going to take this, basically I'm going to rebuild this scene here. So I'm going to take scene one, I'm just going to drop this into a new composition. We're going to make sure it honors that 3D stuff there. See it drawing on. And so now what I can do is I can go to layer, new, I want to make a camera. We'll leave all this the same. And we're going to go to layer, new, and we're going to go to null object. And so null object is basically going to be like my cameraman. So I'm just going to label that cameraman. And we're going to attach our camera to the cameraman. So whatever the cameraman does, the camera's going to do. Now your null object needs to be 3D layer. So click on that. So now I can go here. Let's just start here. I'm going to hit P on the keyboard and I'm just going to adjust the position. So I'm going to click on P for the keyboard or for my position. I'm going to move here and we're going to zoom out of our Z. So I'm going to click the Z axis number there. I'm just going to click and drag that. We're going to go way out, like 2000 something. Okay. And then I can go over here and I can maybe drag and click and drag to my X axis so that I slide to the right. You can also click these arrows and drag them if you want. It doesn't really matter. Okay. So that's what's happening here. Maybe if I move this down, my Jesus images will be drawn out as well. Basically, my camera is just now moving around that scene that we made. I can highlight these, set a easy ease, and make a nice little camera movement on these so that it starts slow, goes fast, and then slows down again. Again, I'm kind of going through some things pretty quick, but if I do a little test render, you'll see what happens. And so here you can see that it sort of flies out and moves to the side, and you get that parallax shift, so it feels very like you're in that 3D space. You can see that the colors are animating there. Those little lines are drawing on these scenes here. So you kind of time it out with the actual drawings themselves. Okay, so from there, now that we have that established, really that's kind of it. So on the main scene, I have a background color, and that is just it's just a gradient, nothing too fancy. So I can drag this in here, and we get our background. It's just a gradient ramp on this layer. And then once that's done, I put the text in there, and then we have that into another composition. And inside of here, you have this kind of grain on top of that, giving it like a little bit of a paper texture and some animated grain. Makes it feel a little more tangible. And then we also have a posterized time effect on here. That's just an adjustment layer with the posterized time effect, and I have that set to 18. So it gives it this 18 frames per second feel. So it has a little bit more of a jittery vibe to make it feel a bit more cartoony. And it just adds a nice little touch. So that's really it. And then each one of those we built out the same thing for each one of these scenes. So they kind of transition from one to the next with just some masks here. So you can see this mask cutting through our scene as scene number 2 transitions over. Pretty simple stuff. And that's how we made our entire project. So that's about it. Like we said, we packaged all of these together for churches and for pastors to be able to use and customize to fit the message that they are preaching on. You can go in, you can change all the colors around, you can change your text to really make it stand out and make it kind of make it your own for your church. So I hope this was helpful. Hope you learned something. Again, don't be afraid of AI. Use it as a tool. It's not going to take your jobs and control the world, I hope. But for now, I think it's a great tool to just expand your style and give you some ideas that you maybe have never thought of. So thanks again for tuning in. I hope this was helpful, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.